Okay, we're going to talk about ratification. What ratification means is formal approval process. So when they finish the Constitution, they spent that whole summer from May to September um, dealing with all the different compromises that they came up with. They signed it on September 17th, 1787. And just like everything else, just like the Declaration of Independence, just like everything else this new government wanted, they wanted to make sure that the people were involved with this, that it just was not this small individual group of people taking over a government, because that's literally what they did. This was in and of itself a revolution. They were under the Articles of Confederation. You have 55 men decided they don't like the government that they have, so they go in and they create a brand new government. So copies are sent to the states to be ratified or formally approved. There are 7 articles, and we're going to start looking at the Constitution, and this is the final article. And an article is just a section, a major section. And so the very last thing they talk about in the Constitution is how this document is going to go into effect. We're going to send it to the states. And remember, under the Articles, you had to have 13 of the 13 states to get anything, or in terms of changing the document. What this does is different, and it says 9 of the 13 must ratify in order for the Constitution to go in effect. So it did not need all of them, it only needed 9 of them. So you have 2 sides. Obviously, you're going to have those who are in favor of the Constitution and those who are against it. The Federalists were in favor of it. They are the ones that want a strong central government, and they really thought that this was a choice between the Constitution and anarchy. The Articles are not working. We can't go back there, so you either basically go with this Constitution or we will have no government. Those who favored the Constitution: James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, George Washington. And then you had the other side, the anti-federalist. They opposed the adoption of the Constitution. Their fear was that it put too much power in the hands of the central government, took powers away from the states and the people. Remember, we just won the Revolutionary War. We just fought a strong government. And the Articles of Confederation go to the complete opposite of that, to where we have no, basically, central government that has any powers. And so the anti-federalists have this fear that if we start going back in the other direction, we're going to end up back in a monarch. And if you remember from the video over the Articles of Confederation, the president of Congress at that particular time was actually looking to try and get a monarch to step in. One of their major concerns was that it did not contain a Bill of Rights. The Federalists agreed over some debate, and we'll talk about that later. But the Federalists did agree that they would, if this document, if the Constitution was ratified, the first thing that they would do was add a Bill of Rights. They did not want to open this document up again. They did not want to, because they knew once they opened it up for debate again, that everyone would start to want to put different changes on it. So they said, let's take it as it is, and then let's go ahead and add some amendments to it. The other thing that I didn't put down here, but I definitely want you to get into your notes, is the fact that the other main concern was over-representation. Representation is critical, and we talked about it under the Articles. That equal representation, that was the biggest argument during the Constitutional Convention, the Virginia Plan versus the New Jersey Plan. And then once again, their concern is that if we go with this idea, they wanted more representatives per person. You know, the proposals were good, but they said that's not enough. We want more representation for the states. And so those who were anti-federalists, Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, Richard Henry Lee was against it, and John Hancock was against it. But once again, remember that it was okay at this point to disagree with this new document. These gentlemen were all there when the Declaration of Independence, or most of them played a vital role in the writing of the Declaration of Independence. So they were there and they fought for independence, but now their concern is over this new document taking away powers from the people, which is where they wanted it to stay. Federalist Papers, extremely important documents. You have three authors, John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison. And basically what these Federalist Papers were 85 essays written to convince New York to ratify the Constitution. Remember, the Constitution is sent to the states, and not everyone agreed with this document. And there were many in New York who were very much against this new Constitution taking powers away from the states and the people. And so these three gentlemen, what they did, and we are going to look at several of these essays as we look throughout the rest of the course. We'll look to these different documents. They are very specific about what the Founding Fathers' intent was on each one of the articles and each one of the sections of the Declaration. So anytime there is not a clear understanding of how we want to interpret the Constitution, we look back at the Federalist Papers. I know during the time when Bill Clinton was going through his impeachment process, a president can be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, but it doesn't really outline what that means. And so there's actually a Federalist Papers that talks about specifically how, if a president is not doing their job or they're doing something wrong, there is a way to actually get rid of the president, unlike the king. And so as recently, as the 1990s, these documents are still relevant because they give us insight in what the Founding Fathers really meant. The Constitution is only 8,000 words, and that includes the Bill of Rights. And so it is not very big. It's not specific at all. It was written vague on purpose. It is left up to interpretation, and obviously it has been, the meaning of it has changed throughout time. So it is still used today to clarify the meaning of the Constitution. This is Federalist number 10, and this concern is over political parties. And when we start looking at political parties, one of the things we're going to focus on is the idea that the Founding Fathers were not in favor of political parties. They were concerned that groups of citizens would be driven by emotions and self-interest, and that would go against the whole. And so the feeling was that if we create a large enough legislature and we elected enough representatives, we would have enough diversity that we wouldn't have any small group of aristocrats or wealthy people who would take over and only focus on the small interests of a very small few. Ratification itself. Once again, we only needed 9 of the 13, so the first state to ratify was Delaware. The 9th state to ratify was New Hampshire. So at that point, this document should have gone into effect. But at that point, Virginia and New York had not ratified yet. Virginia is very important to this whole entire process. George Washington is from Virginia. Thomas Jefferson is from Virginia. And if their state does not sign on to this document, there is no way that it's going to go through. Same with New York. So the Constitution needs the support of these 2 states. And at the time when New Hampshire ratified as the 9th state, it did not. So once again, those Federalist Papers play a role here because they are written for the people of New York to convince them that this is a good thing. Vermont is actually a 13th state.
All faculty and staff are reminded to join the FFA for breakfast in Mrs. Griffith's room. All faculty and staff join the FFA for breakfast. Thank you.
Sorry about that, but I'm not starting this video over. So Vermont is the 13th state, which is interesting because it's not one of the original 13 colonies. And I hope you know which one of the states or which one of the original colonies had not ratified at that point. Rhode Island does not ratify until 1790. Rhode Island and actually North Carolina is another state that holds out until later, and they become states later. But basically what happens, it convinces Rhode Island that they need to do this, is that the U.S. Senate actually passes a bill that ends commercial relations with Rhode Island. We're not going to trade with you. And then Providence, obviously a significant city in Rhode Island, threatens to secede from the state and actually leave and become their own state.